handbag makers. Today's video is a tutorial on the Alexandra bag by Kaur Thread Patterns. This is newly released pattern. I will link the where you can get the pattern in the description box down below. This is the version that I'm doing today. This is the accordion version with the front panel, so it has card slots and a zipper pocket in the front, but there is a version where you can do a slip pocket version, and I do talk you through that as well. It does have a zipper pocket and slip pockets inside, and also a slip pocket on the back, shoulder strap and crossbody strap as well. It's a really lovely pattern. It is a very detailed pattern, especially with the front panel here, which you do go through step by step. Obviously the tutorial is quite a long tutorial. I haven't really broken it down, I have broken it down, and I haven't really sped up any of the steps. I've left them in real time, but what I've done is I've put each of the steps into chapters, so if there's a step that you don't feel like you don't need to follow, you can just skip ahead to the next step that you feel like you might need. So like I say, if you want to do the accordion version, each step within that panel is broken down, and it's actually very simple to do. It looks a lot harder than what it actually is. So a couple of little points. When I was going through my pattern pieces and the hardware needed, I forgot to mention that I needed a zipper end, and also when I was top stitching my front panel, I actually top stitched with my gusset section folded out over, and what I should have done was had this tucked in and actually top stitched this behind. So that was a little error that I did make. It hasn't really massively affected the bag, it is fine, but obviously if you read the pattern you'll see that I did make that little mistake. If anybody's got any questions with regard to the Alexandra handbag, please feel free to drop them in the comments down below. This is only the second time that I've actually made the handbag from beginning to end, it's quite a new pattern to me as well. So like I say, the video is quite a long video, but it is broken down into chapters, so you can just go to the chapter that you actually feel that you need. So I hope you enjoy the video, hope it's helpful, and enjoy. So going through the pattern pieces that you'll need for your Alexandra handbag. So in your exterior fabric, which I'm using mainly vinyl, so pattern piece A, which is your exterior top panel, you will need 2 of those. Pattern piece B, which is your side panel, you will need 2 of those, and they will need to be stabilised with piece S4, which is Decaville light, and I've gone ahead and already attached mine. You'll see I've made little squares on my corner, which is 3/8 of an inch. That's explained in the pattern, and I've gone ahead and done mine already. Pattern piece C, which is your base, and then this is stabilised with piece S5, which is an ultra firm stabiliser, something like a Decaville heavy or a Pellon. The lines used to line up your stabiliser are all explained in the pattern, as well as your markings for your purse feet, which I've gone ahead and marked onto my piece already. So that's your base piece. Piece D, which is your front side panel, you will need 2 of those. Piece E, which is your tab, you will need 2 of those, and then that is stabilised with piece S2, which is Decaville Light. There's 2 ways of doing the tab, either with a raw edge or a enclosed edge, and I'll talk you through the 2 different methods when we get to that part. Piece I, which is your side connector, you will need 2 of those. Piece H, which is your handle connectors, you will need 4 of those. Piece F, which is your exterior top panel, you will need 2 of those. Piece G, which is your zipper placket, again this can be done in your exterior, but I've deviated a little bit because I wanted to mix it up, and I've done this in my accent fabric, so I've interfaced it with woven interfacing, and there's 4 of those. And then I have 2 handles, and then I have crossbody strap. And then for our lining pieces, sorry, for our accent pieces, we have piece J, which is our front pocket. We have 1 in our accent, and then we actually have 1 in our lining as well. Now both of those are interfaced with woven interfacing. And then we have piece K, which is our back pocket, and that is in our accent fabric, and that is woven interfacing as well. And then moving on to our lining fabric, we have piece L. These pieces here are mainly because I'm doing the version 1, which is the accordion front, but I will talk you through which pieces you'll need if you're doing the slip pocket version. But piece L for the front center panel, so that's 1 in the lining interfaced with woven interfacing. Piece M, which is the accordion gusset, you will need 2 in the lining, and that is interfaced with the interfacing out of the seam allowances. Again, it's explained on your pattern piece. Piece N, which is your front zipper pocket, you need 1 in your lining interfaced with woven interfacing. Piece 0, which is your front slip pocket, which is 1 in your lining, and again the interfacing is kept out of the seam allowances on the sides here. Piece P, which is the card slot panel, we need 1 in the lining. I've gone ahead and marked my pieces for where I'm going to create my card slots. The only difference that I've actually done with the interfacing to the pattern is with this piece here, because I've used non-woven interfacing here. That's just personal preference for me, because I prefer non-woven when I'm doing card slots, but woven is perfectly fine. If that's what you have, then it's fine to use it. So piece Q, which is the card slot back panel, you need 1 in your lining fabric interfaced with your woven interfacing and kept out of the seam allowances. All of the pieces where the interfacing needs to be kept out of the seam allowances, it's all explained and shown on the pattern pieces. It's really well thought out. So we've got piece R, which is your back pocket lining, one in your lining piece and interfaced fully with your woven interfacing. Piece S, which is your lining panels, you need 2 of those. Piece T, which is your interior zipper pocket, you need 1 of those in your lining fabric. Piece U, which is your interior slip pocket, you need 1 of those in your lining fabric. And then we have a couple of pieces of stabilizers that aren't actually attached until after a certain amount of construction is done. So we have piece S1, which is your front pocket stabilizer, and then we have piece S3, which is your main stabilizer piece, which is Decaville light. If you're not wanting to do the front accordion panel and you're wanting to do the slip pocket piece, what you'll need is 1 of piece W in your lining fabric, which has been interfaced with woven interfacing, and 2 front slip pockets, 1 in your accent and 1 in your lining, which are both interfaced with woven interfacing. So all of my pieces have been interfaced with woven interfacing, bar my card slots, which has been non-woven interfacing. That's the only change I've made. And like I say, all of the pieces, all of the pattern pieces, where it needs to be kept out of the seam allowances, it does actually show that on the pattern pieces for you, so it's really easy to follow. So they're all the pieces cut out so we can make a start. The hardware and zippers that I'm going to use as well are an 8, 10, 13 and 15 inch number 5 zipper, which I've already attached the zipper pulls to. I've got 4 1-inch rectangle zippers. I've got 2 3/4 inch D-rings. I've got 2 3/4 inch lobster clasps and a 3/4 inch tri-glide for my crossbody strap. I've got 2 14mm magnetic snaps, couldn't think of the word then. I've got a turn lock. I've got 5 purse feet, and I've also got just some strap ends for my handles. Now these are optional, these aren't on the pattern, this is just something that I'm going to add onto my handles just to finish it off. So that's all my hardware as well that I'm going to use on my bag. I'm going to start off by doing my handles and my straps because I've got a full bobbin. So I've just drawn a line down the centre and I've put a little bit of double-sided tape just on either side. I'm just going to fold the edge just up to that centre, but just not quite meeting it, so that when I fold the other side it leaves just sort of a little bit of a gap. I'm just using around about a 4.5 stitch length, and I'm stitching about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. And I'm just going to do the other one exactly the same way. Both the straps done, and then I'm just going to sew my crossbody strap in exactly the same way. So the crossbody strap is cut at 3 inches wide by the width of my material. The measurements are given in the pattern if you need to piece your fabric together, if you're using a narrower piece of material, and then this will make a 3/4 of an inch strap. I'm just going to finish off making my crossbody strap. You can sew this as well if you want, but I'm just going to use rivets. Looking to see which would be the best length to use. I'm going to use a longer length because it's quite thick. I'm just going to make sure I've got all my connectors on the right way, because I've done that many times. And then I'm just going to pop a couple of rivets in this end just to make sure it's nice and secure. And I've used 8x10 rivets with this vinyl because it is a little bit on the thicker side. So there's my crossbody strap and my handles done, and we're ready to move on to the next step. So moving on to step 4 with pattern piece M, we're going to start on the accordion gusset. So we meet the short sides together and we stitch together with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and a stitch length of 2.5. Then we turn these right sides out, press them, and then we're going to top stitch along that seam that we've just created and this top stitch and this top bit here as well. That's your 2 accordion gussets complete, and we can pop them along to one side and we'll move on to the tab piece. So depends on how you want to do your tab piece, whether you want to complete it as with your raw edges together. So basically, if you want to complete it with your raw edges together, basically you would pop your piece of Decaville in between, use some fabric glue and glue them together. Then you would top stitch round using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you would use pattern piece E1, and then basically trim round to make sure it's nice and neat. But I'm going to be doing mine so that mine's an enclosed seam, so I'm using pattern piece E. So I've attached my Decaville already. You can sew round, and then once you turn it, insert your Decaville after. I've already attached mine because I prefer to do mine that way. It's just personal preference. So I'm going to sew round at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm using a stitch of 2.5. I'm just taking it really slowly with it being a curved edge, just to make sure I get it nice and neat. And then you just trim back that seam allowance. I'm going to use my pink and shears. Obviously making sure that you don't clip through your stitching, but trim it back to about 1/8 of an inch. And then just really carefully turn it through. Obviously with it being vinyl, you can't iron it out. So I'm just going to use my little tool just to try and help ease these seams out, but without sort of poking through my stitching. And you can just use your fingers just to roll that seam. Just to get it as flat as you possibly can. So I'm just going to use some clips just to flatten it down before I top stitch it. So if you haven't already inserted your Decaville, this is obviously when you would pop it in. I'm just going to change my stitch length back to a 4.5. So I'm just going to use about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to go really slowly just to make sure I get it as neat as I possibly can. And if I've got a hand crank it, I'll just hand crank it round. And I'm just going to close this bottom edge up as well while I'm on. So that's my tab done as well. So I can now put that to one side. Moving on to the front zipper pocket, you're going to need piece L, which is your front centre panel, and piece N, which is your front zipper pocket. So on piece N, you want to follow your instructions and mark the box for the zipper pocket, I fluffed up a little bit and measured my box wrong, so I've had to extend it a little bit. So once you've marked that, then how I find it best to sort of get mine in the position that they need to be is I find the centres of both of my panels, and this needs to be 3/4 of an inch up. So I find my 3/4 of an inch up, and I then find and match up my centres, and then align it up, making sure that it lines up on my ruler and this lines up, and then I know that is going to be, this is going to be straight. And I'll just pop a pin to keep it right. Just make sure I haven't moved that. That's fine. So we're going to just sew around this box to create the opening that we're going to need for our zipper. And we're going to reduce down to 2.5 stitch length. Now what I do just before I get to the corner is I reduce to about a 2 stitch length. Stitch to the corner, stitch up to the next corner, stitch a few stitches, go back to my 2.5, and then again go back down to the 2 again, and then we want to open this box. So just make a little snip in the middle, and I just cut along to either end until usually I'm about 3/8 of an inch to about 1/2 an inch from the end, and then I just cut into the corner. So I cut up to, but not through the stitching, so I get as close as I possibly can. And then I'm just going to feed through the lining through the centre panel and press. So if you find that you have any puckering when you pull this lining panel through, it just means that you haven't got quite close enough, and you just maybe need to snip a tiny touch more. So you can just re-clip, like I say, just trying to make sure that you don't go through that stitching and you don't cut through your fabric, so just be really careful. So I'm just going to go and press that, and then I'll come back and we'll put the zip in. I've just put a little bit of double-sided tape on the 8-inch zipper, which is the zipper that we're going to use for this. So this will just help keep it in place. Just took the top bit of double-sided tape off first, pop it in place, and then I'll take the bottom tape off. I'm just trying to make sure I've got the zipper sort of roughly sort of centered. I've got my zipper pulled sort of out of the way for the time being, and then I'm just going to sew around this box. So I'm just going to make sure my stitch length's on about a 4.5. Make sure I'm leaving a nice long bit of thread before I start. Roughly about here, I'm just going to push my zipper through. It's quite a big one, this one, so I might struggle a little bit. And then I'm just going to basically come to where I started. I'm not back stitching, and I'm going to pull my threads through. So that it's nice and neat on this side. Just use either a little bit of fray check or a little bit of glue as well, just to stop them from coming undone. And then we just bring that top bit down to meet the bottom. And we're just going to sew all the way around to close off this pocket. This pocket doesn't need to be left open or anything. take the excess on my zipper. I just use my lighter on the edge of the zipper whenever I cut the zipper back, just to make sure it doesn't fray. And that is the front zipper pocket all done. So just need to add the front slip pocket to that now. So we're going to just fold this edge down so the edges that don't have the interfacing attached are open, and we're just going to sew along this bottom edge with 3/4 of an inch seam allowance. Oops. I still can't get used to this this foot pedal. I'm just going to turn this through the right way and go and press it. So I just want to top stitch along this top edge. And then we want to attach it to the zipper pocket, and it wants to be 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom. So I'm just going to use a couple of clips just to keep that in place, and then we'll just, again, just using top stitch length, attach that in place. So I'm just going to baste these down just to keep them in place, so that when we're coming to construct later on, they don't move about. Now we'll move on to our card slots. Like I said, when I went through all the pattern pieces at the beginning, I have interfaced mine with a non-woven interface, and purely that is personal preference. I just prefer my card slots to have non-woven, but woven is absolutely fine. I've marked all of my pieces as per the instructions. I have marked it on the back because sometimes with the heat erasable pens it does leave marks, so it's less visible if it's been on the back, but I can still see the marks because this is quite a light material. So basically you've got your first mark, and what you need to do is you need to fold your first mark and bring it up to meet, sorry, I'll start again. You need to fold your second mark and you need to bring it up to meet the first mark, and then you need to go to your fifth mark, fold that and bring it up to meet your third mark, and then you need to go to your seventh mark and bring it up to meet your sixth mark, and then you need to go to your very last mark and bring it up to meet your eighth mark. And then basically what you have is your little concertina thing here. So I'll go through it again. So basically your second mark meets your first mark, and then your fifth mark meets your third mark, and you just basically go down until it makes this. So I'm going to go and give this a really good press and make sure I've got them all properly lined up, and then I'll come back and then we'll basically just top stitch these all together, and then we'll attach the back card panel. So that's all my card slots pressed. So I am just going to top stitch them all now. And then I'm just going to attach the card slot back, right sides together, leaving an opening at the bottom so that it can be turned through. So 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to leave a turning at the bottom. I'm just going to trim these seam allowances down just to reduce the bulk in the corners. I'm just going to turn this through and press it. Okay, so my camera decided not to film that little bit there that I've just filmed, where I was explaining that I'd had a little bit of a moment and forgot to stitch down the middle of the card slots in order to create the divide down the centre before I stitched it to the back of the card slot. Now I could have you know, cut more fabric out and completely refilmed it, but I thought no, what I'll do is I'll just show that you can actually just do it at this point. So all I've done is I've just found the centre, I've just stitched down just from this top card slot, and just stitched down to just before the bottom, just to create the to create the divide, and then I've just pulled the top thread through to the back and tied it off so that it's nice and neat. I decided just not to refilm it, so that, you know, if it's a mistake that somebody else made, you know, you can see that it's salvageable. As I say, it's just one of them days. My iron decided to have a little bit of a wobbler and spit out black stuff while I was ironing it as well, so I thought probably best not to start and recut things out, because that would probably go pear-shaped as well. So that's how I've salvaged that little mistake there. So let's move on. So to start and assemble our front pockets, so we've got our pattern piece J's, and I'm going to start on the lining, and I'm going to install the parts of the magnetic snap that go onto the lining piece of pattern piece J, which is the male parts of the magnetic snap. So I'm going to use a little bit of Decaville light as well. So I've already got my placements for the magnetic snaps made, and these are taken from the pattern piece. Probably don't need that piece to be quite so big. And then I'm just going to be very careful with my seam ripper and make two very small holes where these prongs are going to go, and then do the same in the Decaville light. And I'm also just going to use a little bit of fabric glue I just always like to use fabric glue when I'm installing hardware. I find that it just helps to stop sort of any excess sort of wear and tear, and especially where you've made sort of like cuts in fabric. This doesn't want to go through 2 seconds. Just find it stops it sort of you know, pulling excessively, stops it fraying. So I just push them prongs outwards. And then just a little bit of tape behind them just to protect those prongs. So we're now going to place the card slots onto this piece So it needs to be 7/8 up, and it needs to be centered. What I sometimes like to do is just use a little bit of tape just to secure it while I start to sew. And I'm just going to use back stitch, sorry, not a back stitch length, a top stitch length to attach this. And I'm just going to use a couple of back stitches into the corners on each side. And that will just help sort of give that extra strength. Now the pattern calls for the stitching to be pulled through to the back and tied off. Just use a little bit extra tape on that just to secure that tape, that thread down. Just gonna, a couple of loose threads there, I'll just take off. So now what we need to do is pop our accordion gussets on. I like to make sure that they are with the seamed one down, and they need to be 5/8 of an inch from the bottom. Now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What I found was when I did the first one, when I put it 5/8 of an inch from the bottom, that pretty much lined up with this top edge of the card slots. So just these edges that are raw are going to be lined up with the raw edges of your lining piece of your front pocket lining. So just gonna baste them in place. And just the same on the other side. And this is like the front pocket, like really starting to like come together now. All the pieces have like been constructed and it's now just a case of putting them together. So our exterior piece of our front panel, we're now going to attach our tab by matching our centres, and we're just going to base those in place. And then the accent piece of your front panel and the lining piece of your front panel, the right sides together and are sewn together, and you need to make sure that these gusset pieces are inside, and these get sewn together at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And just go slowly. You can use a hum jumper if you need to, which is one of these, if you need to put that underneath your foot to come up over your tab, you know, where it's thicker. And then I'm just going to cut down this seam allowance, but not take any of this tab seam allowance. So I'm just literally going to take up to there. So I'm just literally cutting down this seam allowance by about half, just making sure that I'm not cutting through any of my stitching. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this through. I'm going to take it to my iron. I'm going to press it, and I'm going to insert my piece of stabiliser as well when I press it, because this is an iron, like a fusible piece of stabiliser. So I'm going to insert it so that it is fused to this side of my panel, so it's on the exterior of my front panel piece. So that's been pressed and the stabiliser inserted as well. Just making sure it's all nice and flat. So I'm going to top stitch that round an 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Basically just taking my time, making sure I'm keeping everything nice and flat, and then I'm getting it nice and neatly around these edges. And when you get to this middle bit where the tab is, again, just take it nice and slowly, and if you need to use the hump jumper, just pop that underneath your foot just to help it up and over. And then the pattern calls for a second row of stitching to be ran round 1/8 of an inch inside of the first row of the stitching that you've just done. So once that's done, we're then going to attach this part of the front panel to the zipper pocket and the slip pocket piece, and we're going to line up one side of the gusset with the bottom of the slip pocket, and we are going to baste that in place. And then we're going to do exactly the same on the other side. And we're just going to find the centre of this front panel. I've already found the centre of this panel. And we're just going to clip them together to keep them in place. And your panel piece D is attached, we'll move these out of the way for the time being, to the part of your zipper pocket and your slip pocket, and those are attached at 3/8 of an inch, 2.5 stitch length. I'm going to attach the other side. And then they both get top stitched down at 1/8 of an inch and 4.5 stitch length, and with the seam going towards the edge of the side panel. Do the other side. and then we'll match them seams, those centre seams back up again. And push them gussets into the middle, and then this bottom just gets basted into place. So that is your accordion part pretty much finished. The construction of it is pretty much finished, so it's not as complicated as what it would look to be. Our next step is to add this part of our purse turn lock. So I am just going to centre the back plate and just trace round to find the part that we need to cut out. And then find so this is probably what I'm going to need to make my cut. So it needs to be a little bit bigger than this, but not so big that obviously it won't hold. So I'm going to go and cut this part out using this punch and a mallet, and then we'll install this part of the purse lock. So I've just cut that little bit out with those dies that I think I got off Amazon and a mallet, and then I've just cut a little bit extra out at the sides for the screw bits to go in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a little bit of glue, just a little sort of dot just in each corner. And I always do this with my hardware just to sort of try and help keep it sort of secure and stop it sort of excessively pulling and such like. So I'm just going to line that up. I'm just going to match my plate up to the back and get the little screws. Now I'm not too worried at the moment about whether it's centered, because I'm going to straighten it up once I've got these screws in place a little bit. And then that's when I'm going to just sort of make sure it's centered and then tighten everything up. So that's the first part of our screw lock in place. I'm just going to pop the other part to one side because we don't need it just yet. And then we need to put the exterior top panel, or one of the exterior top panels, on. So if you haven't already, what you need to do is just cut the little marks that are for the connectors, and these need to be placed so that they are the same way that they are in the pattern, so that it goes up over. So that is the way that they should be facing. So if you can see that, that's how they should be. So they are going to go right sides together, and sew them together at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and at 2.5 stitch length. So you just need to make sure that you're keeping this front pocket out of the way. And there's my bobbin run out. 2 seconds, I'm just going to go and change my bobbin. That was perfect timing. So right, change my bobbin and just move into top stitching the exterior top panel into place at 1/8 of an inch and 4.5 stitch length, and the seam is pointing up over. And again, we're just making sure that this accordion part of the front panel is just kept out of the way. And like I say, those parts of the where the connectors are going to go need to be facing up over. So that is the front part of the accordion panel completed. If you wanted to do the slip pocket version, you'll need your pieces V, W and your exterior top panel. So we're going to start with our pattern piece V, and we're going to, on the lining piece in the centre, we're going to mark 1 1/4 inches down. In the centre, we're going to place our magnetic snap. And just like we did before, I'm just going to place a little bit of deca behind, just to give it a little bit extra strength. And we're going to be placing the male portion of the magnetic snap on the lining of piece V. And then we're going to just place right sides together, and we're going to just sew along the top with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to top stitch in 1/8 of an inch with wrong sides together. So that's the first part of our slip pocket done. And then on this panel here, we need to mark in the centre 7/8 of an inch down, and then that's when we're going to put the other part of our magnetic snap. And oh, I just had that pen. And again, I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to pop a little bit of Decaville light behind just to give a little bit of structure. And the pen that I'm using here is a heat erasable pen, so I'll just be able to go over these marks with an iron, and it will take the ink away, so you won't be able to see them. I find as well that actually the heat erasable do eventually erase with air over time. Well, these ones do. I don't know about other makes. Just before we baste around those edges, I'm just going to put the exterior top panel to pattern piece W and join them together. So at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm just going to top stitch exactly the same way that we did with the front panel with the accordion version. So with the seam facing up, and then just clip together, line them up, and then just baste all the way around. And that is the slip pocket version of the front panel done, if that is the version that you're wanting to follow. Moving on to the back panel, you're going to need your back pocket accent piece, 13-inch zipper, your exterior top panel, and your back pocket lining. So I'm going to start with the back pocket accent piece, and with our zipper to the left, we're going to baste our zipper facing down to the right side of the accent piece. I'm just going to use a little bit of double-sided tape as well, just to try and stop the zip being wavy. You might notice that my zip is probably a little tiny touch longer than 13 inches, probably maybe it's about 14 inches. I just cut mine that way, purely just so that I can have my zip out of the way without running the risk of knocking it, so that it comes off. But it is probably like literally just about 14 inch. But if you've only got a 13-inch zip, then that's absolutely fine. So then your lining piece goes on right sides together. And your seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch. If like me you're using an industrial walking foot, you might find that you can't maybe get quite 3/8 of an inch. It should be fine. I've done the pattern and it worked okay. I think I maybe had to trim a tiny little bit off the bottom, but it should be okay. But if you've got a domestic and you're doing a domestic, then you might want to switch to a zipper foot so that you can get the 3/8 of an inch, but just get it as close as you possibly can. you just want to so this just gets folded back and then top stitched down. Ooh, the top of this just doesn't want to come off today. There we go. So in the back of that lining panel, just brought up to meet that, the zip, and then the exterior top panel again with the openings for the connectors facing up over is then placed on top and then brought down so it's right sides together with the zip. And that is attached at 3/8 of an inch again. That's just top stitched with the seam facing up. So your connectors all want to be facing this way when they're installed, and your zips all want to be facing to the left also when they're installed. So you can go around as well and baste round this zip panel as well if you want, and trim off the excess zip. Not forgetting that if you trim off your zip, just to use a lighter and just burn the edge of your zip just to stop it unraveling. But that is your back panel complete. Moving on to the base and side panels. So at the front of the panel there was some measurements on the pattern for the base, and we're just going to follow those lines for some top stitching. I'm just going to pull my threads through, so I've got some nice long threads there, and I'm just going to follow those lines with a top stitching length. And then I'm just going to sew up to meet where I started stitching. And I'm going to pull those threads through to the back. And then you can use a little bit of glue on the back of those threads, lighter, I like to use just a little bit of tape to keep them secure. And then what I'm actually going to do now as well is just install my purse feet. So I don't know if you can see there because it's actually under my decaville, but I've got the markings from my pattern placed for the purse feet. So I'm just punching the holes through. Another screw, 2, 4, 5. And these are screw purse feet, so they literally just screw in place. You can use, if you feel like you need to, you can use a little bit extra decaville light behind each purse feet if you feel like you need sort of like a little bit extra thickness behind each one. This one hasn't gone in very well. That's better. I'm not just quite getting it screwed in properly. There we go. So that's all the purse feet into the base of the bag. Putting our side connectors onto our side panels. So our side connectors are piece I. So I've marked the centre and just put a little piece of double-sided tape down either side. I think I've got a little bit of glue on my finger. The double-sided tape just doesn't want to come loose today. So then I'm just going to fold those into the centre. And then you want your 3/4 inch D-rings. Another little piece of double-sided tape just to sort of hold it down in place. So those are the connectors to go onto the side panels. So your side panels where you've made your little marks in the corners need to be at the bottom, and we need to mark 1 and 1/4 down from the top and 2 inches in from the edge, and this is where the side connector needs to be placed. So I'm just going to check that it's the same distance on the other side. I'm just going to slowly attach the connector to the side panel. Just use a little bit of scrap fabric underneath your foot just to make sure that your foot doesn't damage your hardware. These threads can be pulled through and tied off at the back exactly the same way that we've done previously in the video as well. So I'm just gonna attach this one in exactly the same way. Moving on to assembling the exterior. So we're going to join the base to the front panel. So I'm obviously doing the accordion front, but if you were doing the slip panel, you would just do it with the slip panel exactly the same way. So I'm just going to right sides together, clip these together and sew it together at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So when you're coming to parts where is really quite thick, where you've got this front panel seam. Just sort of slow down, take your time if you need to. If you need to use the hump jumper, do that, or if you don't have one of them, just a folded bit of vinyl will work as well. And then this part gets top stitched 1/8 of an inch. And then we attach the back panel in exactly the same way. Nearly went through my clip there. And the seams want to be towards the base when you're top stitching. So at this point, what we need to do is we need to add our stabilizer piece. Now this is added, obviously it's quite bulky in parts, so you just really kind of need to press it on in little bits of stages. Obviously this is a non-woven, so if you need to use a little bit of steam, do that, but obviously if you've got vinyl, just be kind of aware that you might need to use a pressing cloth to protect your vinyl while you're doing that. It will take some time to get this sort of stabilizer to adhere. If you find that you're struggling to get it to adhere and it does want to lift off, use a piece of lightweight woven interfacing. That is the entire piece of this piece over the top to keep it in place. That will help. So I'm going to go and do that off camera because it probably will take me about 20 minutes to get that fully stuck down and in place. So you will see that it is slightly smaller because it will be out of your seam allowances. So I'm going to come back once that's done. So for your hidden connectors, what you want to do is you want to, when you've attached the stabilizer on the back of the exterior piece, leave it to cool completely, and then you want to just go ahead and just cut through the markings for where the hidden connectors are going to go. So on the connector pieces, you want to make a line down the centre and just put a piece of double-sided tape on either side, and I'm going to fold the edges into the centre, and this will make a 1-inch connector piece. And then I want to find the centre. Just double check that is definitely the centre. Yeah. And I'm going to feed this through, folding this edge back so that it goes inside, and this, where I've marked the centre of this connector, that should meet up with where the edge of this opening, where it folds in on itself, it should meet that. So I'm going to fold that over, making sure that that the connector is nice and straight, and I'm going to sew along the top edge of the opening, staying within the edges of the connector. I don't obviously want to sew over that because otherwise you would see it. And then put your 1-inch D-ring, rectangle ring, pop that on, and then feed the other end through the opening, pushing the sort of flap part of the sort of like little sort of triangular type opening that we've made through. And we don't want to pull this too tight because, as you can see, it kind of makes it sit sort of very upright. So we just want to sort of pull it through enough so that that sits nice and flat. So I'm just making sure that that is pulled through so I don't have any raw edges showing. I'm then going to hold all of those pieces together, tuck everything out of the way, pull that under my machine and stitch through the 2 pieces of connector and the little flap, just making sure that it's all nice and straight. What you don't want it to do is you don't want it to twist because then it won't sit right. And if you can see there, I've just stitched along that flap opening, and then that just sits nicely. And what I will do is I will just put a little rivet under each bit of those connectors just to keep those connectors nice and flat, and it will just give a little bit extra strength as well. And then what you can also do once you've added a rivet is you can just tape over the back as well, just to keep them all nice and secure. So I'm going to go ahead and just add the other 2 on the other side as well. So that's all my hidden connectors attached. I've popped rivets in. You can, if you want to, do another row of stitching along this top edge here if you want to. That's the hidden connectors inserted. So what we need to do attach now are the other parts of the magnetic snaps and the other part of the purse lock. So when you're installing the other part of the magnetic snaps, to find where they need to be placed, you can do is push down on the male part of the magnetic snap to make an indent. What I like to do is I have these silver pens that I literally just draw on the protruding part, and then when I push down it makes little marks so that I can see where I need to install the other part. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert them now. Oh, I've lost me the bit. Oh, no, it's... And then because I've already put Decaville light on the back of this full piece, obviously we don't need to reinforce the back of these prongs with the Decaville light because it's already been done. And then to mark where we need our other part of our purse, I'm just marking the centre, marking where the prongs need to go. To make them a little bit wider, I think. Luckily that will cover those ones that I've already made, thankfully. There we go. just again covering the back of those prongs just to protect the lining fabric. So that is the magnetic snaps all put together and the rest of the purse lock all installed. So then we just need to move on to our side panels. So we start by attaching our side panels from the top. And we're going to sew them with a 3/8 of an inch seam, and we're going to sew them until we meet this corner here that we marked at the very start. And then we're just going to do the same on the other side with the other side panel. And then we'll just bring it up to the other side, matching up the top. And again, just sewing down at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to where that box is. and then where this stitching ends and this little box is, we want to cut in and up to where that stitching ends on the base of the bag, so on piece C. So I just pull the side panel back, making sure that I'm at a right angle, and just very carefully cut up to where that stitching ends. And then we pull the rest of the side panel and the base so that they meet, and we start our stitching where we finished and sew along to meet the other line of stitching as well. So it can be a little bit difficult. You have just got to kind of maneuver it to and flatten the bag out so that it sits as best as you can get it, but just take your time. And then just the same on the other side. So that is the exterior of your bag complete. What I'm now going to do is I'm just going to trim down these seam allowances. I am just going to check inside my bag. I'm going to turn it through the right way just to make sure that I haven't missed any seams, that nothing's caught that I don't want to be caught. I'm going to trim down these seams, but from this top panel here, I'm not going to trim down this seam. I'm going to leave that seam as it is. So basically just these seams and this bottom seam, I'm going to trim those down. So I've trimmed down all my seams and turned my bag through just to make sure that I haven't missed any seams or haven't caught any seams that haven't wanted to, and just to check it's all okay. So now I'm going to move on to my lining pieces. For the interior zipper pocket, I'm going to need piece S and one of piece S, which is one of your lining panels, and your interior zipper pocket, and you're going to need your 10-inch zip. So as explained in the pattern, you need to make your 7.5-inch box, and we're going to centre this 3.5 inches up from the bottom, Just going to use a pin to keep that in place, and I'm just going to sew around this box using a 2.5 stitch length. So as I get close to the edge of the box, I reduce my stitch length down just to a 2. And then I'm just going to cut like along the centre till I get to about 1/2 inch from the edge, and then clip into the corners exactly the same way that I did in the front panel. So I'm just going to pull this through and press it, and then we'll move on and insert the zip. So the zipper pocket's now pressed, and I'm just going to insert the zip. Just going to use a little bit of double-sided tape just to help centre it and keep it in position. So this is the 10-inch tape that we're using. And then I'm just going to sew around this box 4.5 stitch length. Sorry, my bobbin decided to have a little bit of a wobbler there, so I've just had to unpick it and start again. So I'm sewing round at 1/8 of an inch and a 4.5 stitch length. I'm just moving my zipper pull through into the opening. And I'm just stitching up to where I started, and then I'm going to pull my threads through to the back and tie them off. So it's nice and neat. And then you can either burn your ends or use a little bit of glue just to keep them from unraveling. So just bring the top of the zipper pocket down to meet the bottom, and then we just sew the sides. We're going to leave the bottom open because that is going to be one of our points in which we sew the bag closed after turning. I'm just going to turn the bottom of mine up a little bit to give my pocket a hem, just to make it a little bit neater when I close it. I'm just going to cut off the excess of my zip. Cut these corners, and then I'm just going to fold these back. And I will give these a press, which basically just means that when I come to turn my bag through, these are already pressed, so that this seam will just sit really nicely when I come to close that seam up at the end. To create the slip pocket, you need pieces U and your other lining panel S. So we're going to pull the top side down, and we're going to sew down and along, leaving a turning point at the bottom, and then up and along the other side again. And we're going to do this at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to take this and press this, like turn it through and press this, and then we'll attach it to the lining panel. So So once that's all pressed, you want to put that centered 3 inches up from the bottom. So when you're putting your slip pocket on, what you can do is you can leave your tails long and you can pull through to the back and tie them off. I actually like to back stitch just to give extra strength when you know, you're putting your hands in and out of the pockets. I always back stitch a couple of extra stitches into the corner as well, just to give a little bit extra strength and structure. So, like I say, you can leave your tails long and pull the threads through to the back if you want to give it a really neat finish, or you can, like I say, use a few back stitch to give it a little bit extra strength. And then I'm just going to come up to the middle to divide this pocket in half. So that's the slip pocket now complete, as well as the zipper pocket for your lining panels. So to create the zipper placket, what we need is piece G, so 4 of the zipper plackets. We need to mark 3/4 of an inch down and just put a little bit of double-sided tape along the edge there, and then we need to mark 3/4 of an inch down on our zipper, and we're just going to fold along the edge of that line that we've made and turn it 90 degrees so that it sits along the edge of the teeth. And I'm just going to cut off that excess. And I'm just going to use my lighter to sort of melt the edge of that tape together, just so it holds long enough so that I can put a few stitches in place to keep it together. So I'd already done one side, so that's both edges of that zipper tape done, and you want to be doing the edge that the zip is going towards, not the other edge. That's the edge that we're going to put as a zipper tab on. So that's the zipper done for now. So what we want to do with the zipper plackets is just remove the top of the zipper, sorry, the double-sided tape, and we want to fold the edge down to meet that line, And we want to do that on all 4 pieces. Obviously I'm using my accent fabric here. You know, you can use your vinyl as well. So obviously I've interfaced mine with woven interfacing, so if you were using your vinyl you wouldn't need to interface it. So you then need to mark 5/8 of an inch in, and this is where you want to start with your zipper. So I'm just thinking about, because my fabric is directional, I'm just thinking about making sure I've got my fabric facing the right way. So I'm just going to use a little bit of double-sided tape as well, because I don't want a wavy zip. And I have been finding recently that if I use a bit double-sided tape, it is stopping the wavy zips so much. It's just a pain in the bum getting the top off the tape, but there is just a knack to it. I am just going to put a clip on the end of my zipper so it doesn't come off. So I'm just making sure that that's nice and straight. And then what you want to do is sandwich another piece with the folded edges meeting. So these just want to be clipped in place. You can baste your zipper tape in place if you want to. Obviously, because I've got mine with double-sided tape on, it's fine, I don't need to. And we're just going to sew this short edge at 3/8 of an inch. As you can tell, I'm still trying to get used to this foot on my industrial machine. And then as I get to the end here, I'm just wanting to make sure that these folded edges here meet up and line up right. And then just want to clip this corner. So you're not too close to the stitching. You just want to take out the excess out of the corner so that it does sit nice and sort of flush. And I'm just going to turn that through. and then we're just going to top stitch. And then we just do exactly the same on the opposite side. So you need to mark 5/8 of an inch on the side that hasn't been folded. So again, need to find my one that's the directional. Again, I'm just making sure I've got these corners as pushed out as I can get them. we're going to find the centre of the zipper pocket and start to construct the lining. So we find the centre of the lining piece with the zipper pocket, and then with the zipper pocket facing up, if we then match up those centre pieces, baste them together. And then get our piece F, and with right sides together, sandwich that in the middle. And with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, stitch them together. And then just top stitch them with the seam facing up over. And then we just do the same on the other side. So we find the centre, match the centres up, so going to sew the side seams of the lining panels together. So we're going to start off with the seam allowances at 3/8 of an inch, and then we're going to work the way down to 5/8 of an inch at the bottom, just so that it means that the lining is much smaller than the bag, so it isn't bulky like inside of the bag. So make sure that your zip is tucked inside. I cut my top panels, I think, 1/4 of an inch too big, because I actually cut them by measurements and not by the pattern, and I think I cut them a little touch too big. So 3/8 of an inch at the top, leave the bottom to be completed once the bag has actually been turned through. Complete the bottom through the zip pocket at the end. So with your lining right side out and with your exterior wrong side out, use a little bit of double-sided tape on the inside of your seams to flatten them out and hold them flat, so that when they're sewn together it keeps them all in place. And what we're going to do is put the lining inside of the exterior. I'm going to put the zipper towards the back. Make sure that your zipper is open. And going to match the middle of the side panel with that centre seam of your interior. And then it's just a case of just clipping it all the way around. Making sure that those seams are flattened out. And we're going to sew those together at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. What you want to be making sure as well is that your D-rings from your connectors are facing down over, just that you don't try and sew through them. And just take your time, because there's quite a lot of thick seams. And you want to make sure that you get it all nice and even. And I'm just making sure as I go around that I'm just keeping those seams nice and flat. if you want to with the bean vinyl, what you can do is you can just go around and sew another seam just inside of your seam allowance, just for added strength. It just means as well, if you have gone off in any little areas, you can just neaten it up. And then if you want to trim your seam allowance down at this point, you can. I tend to leave mine as it is on this seam, but it's personal preference. It does say in the pattern to trim it down, but if you want to leave it, you can do. And we're just going to pull the bag through the opening in the lining. So obviously the whole of the bottom of the lining is open, so just carefully bring the bag through. I'm just pushing out those corners. Just go around and just double check that again, that top is all sitting all okay and you haven't missed any seams. That there's no bits that haven't caught. Because we've got the bottom of the bag so open and it's so easy to kind of get your hands up and through, I like to really use my hands to get up and inside of the lining to really push it through so that I can clip. And if you have something like these flat pliers, these are quite handy to kind of push any of these thicker seams flat. So I'm just going to work my way around and clip all of these edges, and I'll be back in a moment. So I've been right the way around and pushed from inside to make sure I've got that edge as sort of neat as I possibly can get it. I've used my sort of flat pliers on any of the sort of thicker seams to kind of crimp them as flat as I possibly can. And now I'm just going to go ahead and top stitch. Obviously top stitching is much easier on something like a cylinder arm than it is on a flatbed like what I've got, but I just tend to squish and push and do the very best that I can do. So I tend to start on a bit that isn't as noticeable, and you can leave your threads long so that you can pull them through into your seam. And again, just really take your time, making sure that you've got that seam as neat as you possibly can. You've got everything pushed out of the way. And obviously the slower that you go, and you're not forcing it through, especially with something like a walk-on foot machine, if you're not forcing it through the machine, you're much less likely to rip or damage your vinyl if you're working with vinyl. Although, you know, it still can happen and it's very frustrating. So I'm coming over the side panels now, so obviously this is the bit where I've got quite a few thick seams in a fairly short space. So if you're using a domestic, just go slow. If you've got a walking foot for your domestic, use that. If you haven't, if you've got something like a roller foot, that would help. If you're using vinyl, a little bit of sewing oil rubbed along the vinyl will help, but just the main thing is just go slow. When you're top stitching, you don't have to, you know, rush, and use lots of clips. So there is all the top stitching on my bag done, and then what you can do, and I'm going to have to do it off camera because I'm going to have to do it under different lighting because I can't see very well, is I'm going to pull and I can pull my threads through to the back, but then I'm going to feed them through to the inside of my my seam in here. So I will feed them back through these holes here and into my seam, so that you can't see them. So what we need to do now is to close up the lining and the zipper pocket. So I'm going to pull my lining through my zipper pocket, and I'm going to sew up this bottom seam together, and I'm going to do that at 5/8 of an inch to match the bottom of the seam of the lining that we did. Remember when we sewed the top of the lining at 3/8 of an inch, and then we came down to 5/8 of an inch to make the lining smaller than the bag. I'm just going to trim that seam down to about half. And then we're just going to box those corners by getting those seams to meet in the middle, pulling them out, and again sewing those at 5/8 of an inch. Trim that seam down to around about a half. And sew the other corner in exactly the same way. And what I'm doing is I'm just pushing one seam one way and one seam the other way. I'm just making sure it's lying nice and flat so it's not twisted. And that's the lining all closed up. And then we just need to close the zipper pocket. pushing the zipper pocket in and then pushing my lining in, which fits really nicely. And I've got a little zipper end here which I'm going to pop on. So I just pop my zipper ends on by just popping a little bit of glue in and folding the tape over on itself and just pushing it in as far as it can go. And then we just need to attach our handles. So I'm just gonna add my handles in. I've already done one on this side. So I'm just gonna mark my placements for the rivets. I think I need a new punch. Mine's not working very well now. I've had it a while, like, so I can't complain. I'm going to put some strap ends on as well, just to finish the handles off and make them look all nice. So I'm going to see which side I want out. So this is the side that I want to be facing, so I'm going to feed it through this way, and my trusted glue. So I just want a little bit inside, not loads, just a little bit. And I'm just going to place that on the end. Get my rivets out. I'm using 8x10s because this is quite a thick strap. This is actually quite thick vinyl. It's not really thick, but it is on the thicker side. So I don't think these holes are punched through fully, so I'm just going to do it again with this one. So I think I need to invest in a new punch. So just clip that on, and then I'm just going to make sure that I'm feeding it through without twisting it, and then just put the strap end on the other side. and this just really helps just to finish it off and give it that really sort of professional look. My lid's on because, knowing me, I'll knock them off and then I'll spend 2 hours picking them all up off the floor. And then I'm just going to use my press to set these. So there it is with the handles done and attached, and then with the crossbody strap. So there you go, there's the Alexandra bag all done and complete. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to see my next video when it's released. I'll see you next time.